And that Wednesday prayer group was good. It was here on Wednesday for the first time. It was funny because we're sitting down and there's like a list of prayer requests that I printed out. And they start off and they're like, okay, we're going to pray over the prayer requests. And the first thing was like, all right, let's go through and cross off the answered prayers. So they cross off half the list. Like, that's the kind of prayer meeting I want to be in, where every week you show up and it's like, okay, praise report. Okay, now we get to do praise request or prayer request. So, I'm Pastor Jared. If anyone, I'm the new pastor here, so probably introduce myself for a couple weeks. Great to see everyone here. Last week, my wife and I shared a little bit about our story and kind of related that to the story of Abraham. That's the story that God put on our heart when we were, just before we were married, when we were still thought God was calling us to get married, but we were young and we were like, I don't know, we're not sure, but we feel like it's God. And He really gave us that story of how to kind of follow even when you don't know all the steps. And that was my big hang-up when we were back then. I was like, God, like you said to take a step, but like there's nothing there. Like where do I put my foot? And He's like, that's kind of the point of faith and trust. And so it's a story that's been like really dear to our heart for many years. So if we're going to tell our story, and we're going to start off something like, let's talk about Abraham and how to hear from God. So that's kind of what we did last week is we told our story, we gave a little bit of an introduction to the story of Abraham. Next week will be the third week and the final week of the series, Firm Foundation. And we're going to be talking about when Abraham, last week we talked about when he first got called to go. And then next week we'll be talking about how he did that, right? And so when he decided to pick up and everything he knew and pick up and go and make the move, kind of some of the stuff he did there and maybe a mistake he might have made there that maybe slowed him down a little bit. And so that'll be next week. But this week, we're going to be talking about, we're going to continue the series Firm Foundation, and we're going to be talking about faith and really dive into that a little bit. And one thing with Abraham, a lot of the stories, you can really find this theme, but Abraham makes it really clear that there's a risk to following God. There is a risk, and not just a risk, but there's also you have to really have that faith. And if God doesn't show up, you could be in trouble, right? And if you find yourself always in a situation where you can always handle it, that's always a scary place as a Christian to be in. Because you really need to be in a spot. I'm not talking about every single day. All right, God, there's a blizzard today. I'm going to drive to McDonald's anyways. Help me survive. There's a wisdom to certain things, right? We can take things a little too far. But for the most part, we have the need to be able to follow God. And if we don't ever find ourselves needing, am I too loud? Is that what it is? Am I really loud?
No, are we keeping kids?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we will keep kids in. We'll continue the family service on April 9th, Easter. We're going to launch a kids ministry. So I thought you were saying, turn it down. I'm like, I'm only talking one volume. It's not my fault. All right. And so yes, but that is the idea. And when we get into it, when we really look at kind of American culture, we kind of have become obsessed with American culture with this concept of safety. And not just, obviously safety is good, right? But, the idea, the American version of safety sometimes, we kind of have this bubble. You ever heard the term helicopter parenting? Okay? So, when we first moved to Virginia, that was, I think, the first time we heard it. And we had one of the ladies who was like, I'm a helicopter parent. I'm like, what does that mean? And she described it. I was like, oh, we might be that a little bit too. I need to work on that a little bit, and that is something that God's had to deal with me on, is trusting Him with my kids. But this idea of we want everything to be we want a guarantee, really. That's what it is. In our American culture, we want a guarantee on everything. So we're like, God, if I give my life to you, and I follow you, and I do the things it says in here, then you're going to just kind of make all the bad stuff go away. And that can kind of lead us down the wrong path sometimes, especially when we really look at how the lives of different people from the Bible played out, or how famous preachers, missionaries, evangelists, just Christians throughout the time have lived. And we hear these stories and we're crying, and we're like, God, use me like that. And God's like, okay, but you've got to step out. And so I want to talk about this concept a little bit about how God is a good God, but He's not always a safe God. And I want to back that up a little bit. In fact, I want to read a quote that will kind of, wait, you just think God's not safe? Okay, we're leaving. We're out of here. I have a couple of quotes that I think will kind of help frame that statement a little bit. The first one is from a lady named Grace Pike. Says, though following Jesus is not a safe calling, he is the only true place of safety. So even though it's not always the places he leads us, right? There's a reason we have that verse. They walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? You have to walk through that for him to be there. And so the Bible makes it very clear that there are going to be times that God is going to call us and lead us to places that are not our American kind of bubble version of safe. There's not that 100% guarantee. There are times that we are going to have to trust in God. We're going to have to rely on God. And honestly, and that's the scary part, is if God doesn't show up, I'm in trouble here. And so I've been in that place a few times, and when God has called me out, there's also the opposite side where it's because your own fault, maybe you didn't listen, and that's when I'm like, okay, you guys are relating. Good, I thought it was me. And then that's when you just have to humble yourself, and you're like, God, remember that thing you were kind of telling me not to do, but I pretended like I wasn't hearing, and I did? I need help. And I've been there too, where I'm like, God, listen, I'm not ready to ask you for help. I don't deserve it. You have every right to just leave me hanging out to dry. This is the natural consequences of my own just not listening to you, or maybe in an extreme case of my own sin. But I'm repenting, and Lord, I know that you are good, you are just, and if you find it in your will, can you help me with this? Can you help me out of this? Or at least if this is something that I need to go through, these consequences, because I'm just reaping what I sowed, Lord, I know you're faithful to be there with me, so there's that side of it too. But this idea of as we follow God and trust in God, and as I was putting my notes together, I thought of the movie Chronicles of Narnia. Anyone ever seen that? Okay, I wanted to show the clip, but apparently, and this is my daughter's pet peeve, is they took a scene with the quote I wanted from the movie, and they split it up. They put half of it in one scene and half of it in another scene, and so neither one of them were quite as powerful. And I was like, oh man, okay, so I guess we'll just read the quote. So this is from Lucy, I believe, the youngest girl. So originally it all goes back to C.S. Lewis, and they're talking about Aslan, and in that story, he's kind of like a picture of Christ, right? And so they're kind of using the idea of Aslan as the good and strong and powerful king, as the lion, to represent Christ. And when she finds out he's a lion, she gets a little nervous, right? So sometimes I think that we come to Christ and we're kind of like that. We're like, oh, okay, I'm going to use the phrase, and this is going to make more sense, especially now with the new Jesus Revolution movie. But sometimes I think we have this idea of what I call hippie Jesus, right? And we think of Jesus and him walking with his disciples, and he was kind and he was there, and while that definitely is an attribute of his personality, that's not really how Jesus is sitting up in heaven right now. We get a better picture of Jesus in Revelation. White hair, he's got his tattoos on his thighs, he's got the sword, the white horse, so he's a good God, he's a powerful God, he's a strong God, and he's able to protect us and be there with us. And so she at first is kind of thinking of this kind of gentle, kind of mild Jesus. Oh, it's okay, everything's fine, let me just hug you and tell you it doesn't matter, that we kind of sometimes have turned him into, right? It's like we kind of remember some of the Bible stories but forget the actual teachings, and we've turned it into this. Again, I used to say hippie Jesus because it painted the picture. So she finds out he's a lion, and she gets nervous. Who here would be nervous if you're about to meet a lion? Okay, now especially if you can talk. I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. I'm like, okay, he's more intelligent, but talking, I don't know if I feel better or worse about this. So she asks, she's like, hey, give me a sneak peek. Is he gentle? Is it okay? He's a lion. Is this going to be okay? I'm nervous. What's going to happen? And so the response is, so she goes, is he safe? That's what it was. Is he safe? I'm going to go talk to a lion. Is he safe? And the response is, of course he isn't safe, but he is good. He's not a tame lion. And it goes on to talk about how he's the king, and he's here to deliver us from the darkness that was coming over the land. And again, that was written to paint a picture of Jesus. So Abraham finds himself in this situation. And Abraham is nothing if not able to grow. So we think of Abraham as a founding father of faith, which he became. And sometimes we write him off, especially I remember in Sunday school as a kid, But that was Abraham, that was Moses, that was those guys. Like, we can't obtain that. Those guys were these righteous, amazing guys. And then you get older, you really research, and you realize, oh no, the only difference is they didn't use the sin in their life as an excuse to stop following God. They kept growing. So when he starts off, he has this revelation, or he comes to the realization, wait a minute, okay, I thought when the one true God revealed himself to me and asked me to follow him, I kind of thought everything would just fall in line. There's some risk here. And so before he developed all of his faith, right, he took off on the journey, and he starts to realize, hey, there's some danger. And so what he did is what we all have a tendency to do, is he began to resort back to his own strength, his own power, his own ability to figure out the situation. So we have examples like where they're going into an area and they're like, oh man, my wife is very attractive, right? And he's like, they're going to kill me to be able to take her, right? And so I don't know if he had really low self-image, or if she was just really that attractive. But either way, or a combination of both, it was a legitimate fear. Hey, when we go into this town, they're going to kill me and take her as their wife. So rather than going, you know what, God? He does this later with other things. He says, I don't care what I'm looking at. I know what God called me, what God said. But he's on the beginning of his journey here. And so he goes, well, I don't want to die. I need to help God make this promise happen, because God said this thing's going to happen. And surely if I die right now, that's not going to happen. So I know what I'll do. I will help God. I'm a smart man. We will tell them that she's my sister. I mean, she is technically my sister, anyways, from let me go down this rabbit trail. So I'm not really lying, or if I am, it's a white lie. And, I'm just helping God out to fulfill the promise and calling he's put in my life. Has anyone ever used this kind of logic before? Yeah, I'm guilty. So they tell this lie, right? So he goes in and he's like, yeah, she's my sister. And he almost loses her. Not once, but a couple times. And it's like, did you not learn? And he was so afraid because he was still growing in his faith and developing his faith. And he wasn't quite sure yet. Can I fully trust God? I don't know. He seems like, in one sense, I feel like I can, but in another sense, I feel like there's some danger here. And I don't understand why he's not just stopping all this. Why is he not allowing all this? And he had to develop in his faith to be confident and trust God even in those dangerous situations. And I feel like that's something that we can fall into. As we see a dangerous situation, and what's our prayer? Lord, take it away. Wipe it out. And if he doesn't, it's like, oh, okay, well maybe that's not God's will after all. And then we can back away. And God's like, whoa, no. I never said that wasn't your will. That was your first test. That was your first opportunity for growth. Okay, talking about Chronicles of Narnia, there's another scene with him, with Aslan, and then with Peter, the oldest boy, where there's an enemy to face. There's a giant wolf. There's an enemy to face. And he's like, all right, let's go. All the army's right. Let's go take him out. Let's go save the sister. And Aslan says, no, he needs to go do it on his own. And he's scared and he's nervous and he's like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And that set him up for future success. Is going through that trial. It made him stronger. It helped him and was able to teach him what to do. And so many times, I think that we kind of abort what it is, the growth that God wants to have on us. Because we say, God, take this away from me, and if you don't, I'll take it away from you. And we'll remove ourselves sometimes out of God's will. And God is gracious, and He'll always help us get back. But you can definitely slow it down. I can see times in my life where I know I was supposed to do something, and it was hard. And I took an easier route. I can think of a couple right now on the top of my head. And it caused a delay. It slowed me down. Much like the Israelites, how they had to go through the 40 years when it should have been like a 40-day journey. And I've definitely done that to myself because of taking it out of God's hands and saying, hey, I'm a smart person. God surely wouldn't want me to go through this. Let me fix it for Him. And so I have been there. So let's jump into our main text. We're going to be reading from Genesis chapter 13, starting in verse 5. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land was not able to support them both dwelling together because their possessions were so great. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's flock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites dwell in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, let there be no strife, I ask you, between me and you, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen. For we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Please, separate from me. If you will go to the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right, then I will go to the left. And we'll stop there for a second. So there a situation arose. And now we see Abraham kind of starting to step out in his faith a little bit, right? He's screwed up a few times. This is the next chapter, right after the stuff with Sarah. And he was like, no, she's my sister, almost lost her, did it again. So now he's really realizing, I have to imagine that he had an opportunity to really reflect on where he messed up. And really spend some time, it's not recorded, but he probably even had some conversations with God and was like, so God, what should I have done? You got to remember, his parents weren't Christians. He doesn't come from like a long lineage of Christian family, right? He's the founder. Like, he's the first one. He's out there worshiping cow gods with everyone. And then the real God shows up and says, hey, let's go. Let's start this thing. And so he has no background. So I can imagine he's probably like asking God, like, okay, God, I get that I messed up. My wife told me. And I get it. I see what I did wrong. What should I have done? And I can almost imagine this conversation where God was like, look, I promised you this. Jesus has a very similar conversation with the disciples. Why are you waking me up? Why are you worried about the storm? Did I not say we were going to cross over to the other side? So I imagine a very similar conversation between them. And now he's learned. So now we have the situation to where the next thing comes up. Now him and Lot, like, they're being blessed, right? They're rich. They have lots of cattle. They have herdsmen. Essentially, in modern day terms, it's like they're two very strong businesses, or a business with two big divisions, and they're just now starting to compete for resources. And so their employees, as it were, starting to like fight each other and be like, no, like this is ours. Like this is Lot's area. And they're like, no, this is Abraham. He was the one who started this whole thing. You're just a sister company, anyways. Like, we have first pick, and they're going back and forth at it. So Abraham very easily, and would have been within his own rights, to say, you know what, Lot, nephew, little kid that I've helped and I've set up. I mean, really, you're a made man at this point, right? Like, you did nothing. I've done this all for you. I did it out of respect for my brother, but I've done all I need to do. Like, you're rich. Okay, get out of here. Go on. Go make it for yourself. I'm not going to, like, I've got you set up, but you're kind of getting in my way a little bit. And he would have been perfectly in his rights to do that. In fact, he's already gone above and beyond what he really had to do. He was helping out his nephew at this point. But he doesn't. So instead he decides, you know what? Okay, God has promised all this to me. But you know what? Even if I split it, even if I give half of it to Lot, God promised me, like, it's still going to happen. So I don't need to worry about what I can see. So he decides to give half of it to Lot. And then he takes it a step further. He goes, you know what? If I take the better land, because I could go and say, Lot, listen, we're going to split up. I'm going to take this land. I'm the senior. I'm the one that got this all. You have everything because of me. This land is still good. It's not as good, but this land is still good. Why don't you take this, and then I will come over here, and I will take the better land. We'll be good, right? And Lot would have had nothing to say, but yeah, that's more than generous. But I can almost imagine Abraham thinking, because we see this thought pattern in so many of these men and women of God in the Bible, where they go, you know, I can do that, but people might say, yes, of course Abraham is blessed, and of course he is successful. He was set up, he got the better land. He was able to take the better land. It's not because God blessed him, it's because anyone could have done that. Have you ever heard that? Well, give me $1 million and I can be successful too. Well, that's not quite how it worked. They got the $1 million because they did the right actions. But okay. And so you could easily have said that. And so what he decided to do is he goes, you know what? You pick. I'm going to take it out of my hands. I'm not going to just mostly trust God. I'm going to 100% trust God. So he lets Lot pick. Lot, of course, goes, that was stupid. I'm taking the better one. Right? So Lot should have said, wow, uncle, okay, that is so generous. You've already done so much. Listen, I can clearly see good land, better land. I'm going to go with the good land because you have done so much for me already. You take the better land. I will take the good land. And thank you so much. But instead he goes, really? Sucker. Okay, I'm taking the better land. Lot had the problem of not being able to see past what he could see. And he never developed faith. He had the ability to, he had knowledge, he understood about God, he had belief in God, but he never had the faith in God that Abraham had developed. So he takes the better land, and that's a whole other story. Basically, it doesn't go well for him. He loses everything except for his life and the lives of his daughters. He loses his son-in-laws. He loses his wife. He loses all of everything they had. Everything they had. So think of having like a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar business, and you walk out, and all you have left is your life and your daughters. And you're living basically homeless. They're hiding in a cave. They're afraid to even go into the city where they were able to go and seek shelter. Abraham, on the other hand, begins to prosper. And so what we see here is we have an issue where we have Lot is blessed above his character. Okay? He's blessed above his character, and because of that, that blessing then has to, it really almost becomes like a curse, because if you are given a level of responsibility, a level of blessing above what you can handle, have you ever thought, God, why don't you just, man, if you just gave me this, I'd be set. But God won't sometimes in his mercy, because he's like, no, that would absolutely destroy you like it did Lot. And so we, a lot of times, will be praying for things kind of above our pay grade, as it were, our spiritual pay grade, or our character, really. And so really, sometimes we pray for a blessing, and then adversity comes. You ever have that happen? That's because God goes, well, I'm getting you there, right? If you want that blessing, let's go. Let's get there. You're going to have to go through the valley to get to the mountain. Like, you have to climb. There's no helicopter tours of this hill, of the mountain. We have to climb up the mountain, and then you will be ready. You'll acclimate. You'll be on top of it, and you'll be good to go. Versus we see the opposite with Abraham, where he was able to give part of it away, and the blessings couldn't stay away. He gave it away, multiple times. There's stories where he could have taken wealth, and he didn't. And he was basically, I'm going to guard God's glory. And there were several times, and if you go study his story, after he defeated the king, there's all these different things where, after this stuff, he could have taken wealth, but there was a slight possibility that the glory would have gone to someone else other than God, and he wasn't willing. That was his character and his faith in knowing that, God said it. I don't have to go through these man-made channels. It's going to happen. So I'm not going to take the easy way and possibly tarnish God's name. Kind of the opposite of the nation of Israel, to be honest. It's like the exact opposite. And so he kept taking these things that kind of limited the blessing, but really it just gave it permission to grow. So what would happen is, as his character grew, the blessing kept growing to catch up to it. And before he knew it, he was just like, I don't even know where this all came from. It's all from God. God is good. And he was so wealthy that he was wealthier and more powerful than basically the nations and the cities around him, that he was able to do anything that God called him to do. And every time he took a step of faith and his character grew, it just grew more. Yeah. So today I just kind of want to bring it back and to think about our lives, about how does that apply to us? Okay? So what situations in our life is it? What is it that we need to be able to step out in and follow God in? And most of you, as I'm saying that, you can probably think of something. It can maybe be something big. First off, it can be, well, I need to get saved. I never even followed God in the first place, and we talked about that some last week. It could be that any number of things, right? It could be you're thinking okay, well, God never called me to go out and do something grand. He never said that move across the country and pastor a church. He never called me to another nation to be a missionary. He never told me to start up some great ministry or write a book or any of these things. And maybe what you're stuck on is that God's telling you to forgive someone. Or maybe God's telling you to, hey, I need you to rearrange your life a little bit and spend some time with me. So whatever it may be, we all have that next step. Right? Does that make sense? There's all something. So you may be saying, yeah, I know exactly what it is. If you call me right now, please don't. But if you call me right now, I know exactly what that next step is that I need to do. And then others of us, maybe we don't know. Right? I don't really know what that next step is. And I remember there was a time in my wife's life, before we were even dating or married, where she was praying, and I think you might have mentioned this a little bit last week, but she was praying God, reveal your grand plan for my life. What is it, God? What is the big thing? What are you calling me to do in my life? And God said, like, hey, you know what? Don't worry about that. Before we get to that, like, we need to work on you and we need to work on us. Us as in her and God. And so he really began to just show her, like, let's deal with some stuff. Like, I don't want to reveal your calling, as it were, and have a situation to where you then end up becoming like Lot, where you're now so, like, you're trying to go out there and make it happen, and it's going to cause you to fall. I want to be in a situation where you can grow, and as your character grows, and as your relationship with me grows, that will happen. And that's exactly what happened. She spent time doing that, and then all of a sudden, little doors would open. She didn't realize what she was walking through. Little thing here, helping here, little setbacks. I tell that one story, okay? So she's an introvert, very much so. And one of those doors she had to walk through is she was afraid of, really, honestly, was just afraid of people, right? And that's one of the things God talked to her is like, listen, this was a young teenager. You wanted me to tell you some like great calling to go off and be a missionary or be a singer, whatever it is, something grand for the idea of ministering for me. He's like, but you don't even really care about people. And so she's like, okay, I'm growing. So then our youth pastor at the time goes, we had a coffee shop, and it was like once a month, I think, something like that, every 2 weeks, something like that. After Sunday night service, remember Sunday night services? Okay, after Sunday night service, you go get some coffee, and it supported the youth for whatever they were doing. And she's like, hey, I need you to be the cashier. Okay, how many, like, if you have, like, crippling anxiety of people and crowds, being a cashier is, like, in the top 3 things you would never want to do, okay? So she tells her, the youth pastor's name was Wendy, so Wendy tells Brandy, I need you to be the cashier. And Brandy's like, that's really funny. So you want me to make the coffee? No, you're going to be the cashier. So she does it, because, like, her youth pastor told her she had to. It really is more of a deer in headlights, like, okay, so she's doing it. And how many people did you serve before? Like 2. So she serves like 2 people, and like the 3rd person comes up, and she was so nervous she froze. And so she's trying to give them the change, and it wasn't a math issue. It was like person, and so she just like drops the money, ran across the room, like from here to like the kitchen, runs through our fellowship hall, and locks her down, runs into the bathroom, the girls' bathroom, gets into a stall, locks the door, and she starts crying, like fetal position crying, right? And she's like freaking out, right? And so that is not a fun situation. Anyone want to sign up for your version of that? No, you don't. But if she hadn't have done that, if she wasn't obedient then the next thing would have happened. That's right. And then the next thing, and the next thing, and then a couple years later, we're engaged, and our youth pastors asked us to be the junior high leaders, to lead a devotional, and then we got married, and they're like, hey, be the actual, now you're married, be the official, like, actual junior high youth pastors, and then we became youth leaders, and then we became the youth pastor, all these things, right? God just opened up door after door after door. And God was so good, too. So he put her, me too, but we're talking about her right now, put her in these uncomfortable situations, but it grew, right? So first it was, hey, you're going to have to talk to teenage girls and minister to teenage girls. I can't talk, I'm only like a couple years older than them, I'm nervous. And she got more comfortable with that. Hey, and God knocks again. Hey, by the way, Brandy, they have parents. Yeah, I know. I've been through high school, I've been through biology class, I understand how humans work, okay? Okay, but they have parents. Okay, what are you trying to say, God? Well, you gotta minister to the parents too. Oh no. That's the pastor's job, or I'm not doing that. And just thing after thing after thing, which led up to the story from last week of her becoming the kids pastor. Which even that, she was like, I remember this. She comes to me, and I'm going to close with the story. She comes up to me and she goes, "I'm going to tell you something, but I don't want to tell you." Okay, well, you're clearly going to. What is it? Well, I feel like God is might be saying something to me, but if I tell you, I feel like that kind of makes it real, and then you're going to push me. I'm like, well, what? And she's like, I feel like God is preparing me to be the kids pastor, but we have a kids director already, so like I don't really it doesn't even. I know it's not even. I'm like, no, babe, I can see that too. Like that's definitely happening. Like you should listen. She's like, oh. That's what I was afraid of. I was hoping you'd say, no, we already have a kids director. There's no way that's going to happen. And how many months was it later? later? 3, 4, 5?
About 3.
Okay, 3 months later, our kids director resigned. He's like, I'm done. And they were like, well, what are we going to do? And so Brandon, we're sitting there in the office, and we're like, well, what are we going to do? And I don't know who said it first, but basically it came down to Brandon was going to be just going to fill in for a couple months until they could find something. They figure out what they were going to do. So a couple months go by. Okay, can you just be the intro? All right, this is going to be a little longer than we thought. So she does that for a while. Then they're like, you're the new kids pastor, the kids director, right? And then, because at the time it was kids director. I don't know what the difference is, but it was kids director. She wasn't the pastor, she was the director. And then a few months go by, and she really, God gave her a pastoral heart to the point where they finally came back and said, we're going to change your title to kids pastor because you're really pastoring these kids. And we want the parents to know that you're the kids pastor. And so that was something she walked through. And just like Abraham, like you have to start small. And she, just like Abraham, made a bunch of little mistakes. This is kind of fun. I remember use my own self stories. I like this. Anyone want to be next week? So she was able to grow and make less mistakes. But if she had said, I'm not able to do this, I messed up, she would have been stuck there. And we have a lot of peers who are still stuck at that level because they never were willing, as soon as something got hard or got uncomfortable, they backed away from it. And what is, to me, is a tragedy is that as a country, as a culture in this country, we've really taken that concept of backing away from what God has called us to do because it's hard, and we've turned it into a worldview. And we now embrace it. And so now we say things like, well, I have to, like, God is love, and he would never ask me to do something that makes me uncomfortable. I can't find that. Right? God would never want me to go through something that would cause me any pain or discomfort. And at some point I'm like, okay, so I get the idea of translations, but we must have completely different Bibles because that's not what I'm getting. When I read it, I feel convicted, like I need to get out there and serve God. Like I love that last song where it's like, hey God, here's my life, like my hopes, my dreams, my ambitions. And our culture's gotten to the point where like, God, here's what I'm going to do. You can bless it. And when you make me rich and famous, you make me the next TikTok star, and I will, every 5th video, what do you think, God's your sponsor? Like every 5th video you're going to drop out a shout out to God, like, he's like some water brand that you're got to deal with. And then we wonder, where's the power? Where's the hope? Where's the peace? And we find ourselves in a situation where we stagnate, and then it's like the pastor gets up there and he's like, hey, Easter's coming up, we need to invite friends and families. See what I'm doing? We got to invite people. This is just an example. We got to invite someone, right? And you're like, well, you're thinking about it, and basically it boils down, if you really are honest about it, it boils down to, I don't feel like I can invite people to church because my life is no different than their life, with the exception on they can sleep in on Sundays and they get to go and get drunk at the bar with their friends. So I'd be asking them to basically downgrade their life. They give up the couple things they do like, and they're not going to get anything in exchange for it except they have to come to church instead of sleeping in. I mean, who wants to sign up for that? That's a terrible deal. I'm the pastor and I don't want to sign up for that deal. And so I remember finding myself in that spot at one point. I'm like, why am I not like more inviting people? And I'm like, oh, okay, because I've stagnated and my life is not that much different. I'm more moral than they are. That's it. But they don't want to be more moral. They've done that, been there, done that, doesn't work. We need the power of God in our lives. So that song that we sang, I want to provide an opportunity for us to really do that. So we sang it. We lifted our hands. We sang, here I am, God. Take my hopes. Take my dreams. Help my life to glorify you. Make it a fragrance unto you. Make my life. So if we really mean that, we're gonna play one more song here. We're gonna open up these altars, and I want us to take this time to just. You can stay where you are, or I encourage you to come forward. There's nothing magical about coming forward on a spiritual sense, but on a human kind of, the way we work, it does kind of gets us up, it gets us out, it gets us moving, and sometimes it can help us a little bit there. So, if you need to, stay where you are, but if not, come forward. And I want to open up these altars, and I want us to have a time where, if you really mean that, right? I know, like, we're sitting there, and like, I've been singing songs before, and I'm like, wait, what am I even singing? Do I even agree with this? it's a weird song. Where did this song come from? Or I'll be singing it, and I'm like, wait a minute. My life doesn't match up. I should probably not sing that unless I'm going to actually dedicate to what I'm singing. There's a disconnect here. So if you find yourself like, no, I really was singing that. Like I wasn't just, okay, when I was singing, I'm going to sing. If you really find yourself saying, yes, God, I want to give my life to you. I want my life to be like a beautiful fragrance to you. I want to give up my own hopes and dreams, and maybe you can use them, maybe not, but I want to give it all to you. I want you to come forward when this music starts and just spend some time and just say that again in your own words. However it is, however you want to talk. If it was me, I'll give you a quick example. Maybe this will make it a little more comfortable for you. If it was me a few years ago, it would have been, God, you know, I had my life all planned out. I was going to be a filmmaker. I was going to be a big director. And then when I went on and got to do interviews and talk about it, I was going to then glorify you, God. Lord, I lay it down. And if you want me to go into ministry, I'll do that. So that would have been my call, my laying it down for God. So whatever your version of that is, I want to give you an opportunity to do that. If you're here and you're thinking like, well, that's great, Pastor Jared, but like I fall in that first category, I don't even know God. Find one of us. Cody, myself, Brandy, Shirley, come find one of us and we will pray with you. We'll walk you through that process and pray over you and help you to accept Christ, become a Christian. And then everything we're talking about then applies to and all the wonderful blessings that Abraham had and that we have in our lives to be able to be led by God. And even though it may not be safe, quote unquote, to be the safest place we can be in and be in the calling of Jesus. So go ahead and play that song and let's open up these altars.
The rock on which I stand, and everything around.
may be in dangerous situations, your arm is around us, Father God. And that is the safest place we can be in, is in your will, in your calling for our life, Father God. Lord, I just pray that you put it on our hearts, that you will give us soft hearts that will always respond to you, Father. And whatever it is you are calling us to, whether it be a big thing or a little thing, that we will be a people much like Abraham. That if you can say one thing about us, is that we will follow God. Even if we stumble and we have mistakes, that we will get back up, we will continue following God. Not so we can be blessed, but so that you will be glorified, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.